Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, I'm Miles. I use they, them pronouns, and I talk about books a lot, mostly horror and queer lit and a little bit of nonfiction thrown in there. And if you're coming back, thank you for joining me again today. I really appreciate you being here. I read 15 books this month, and I don't want this to be a super long video, so I'm kind of gonna go through some of them rapidly, talk about some a little more in depth, but I'm not trying to make like a 35-minute video, so hopefully we can cool it down a little bit. So I'm just gonna get right into it. This was not the best start to the month. I read Plato Symposium. Fuck this book. First of all, I didn't give it a rating because if I'm reading something just for school and not for pleasure at all, usually I don't want to rate it. If I rated it 1 star, I read it for a class which I dropped about a week after because I just could not stand it. I haven't really read that much philosophy, but this was just not it for me. Its musings on relationships and love and what that meant obviously were very outdated. I did enjoy that it was gay, I guess, but it was also really weird. Like, the love between a man and a young boy is considered the highest form of love. And we didn't even talk about how weird that was in the class. So I dropped it. That class was not it. I pushed through the 100 pages because I was trying really hard to be good in that class and trying to really apply myself, and I wish I didn't. It was not worth it. If you like this book, I'm sorry. That's all I have to say. Second, I read The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. This is the book that the movie Carol is based off of. I actually haven't seen the movie yet. I'm going to get around to it soon because I think I'll like the movie a lot more. I gave this book 2 stars. I didn't hate it. I don't think it was a bad book, but just my personal enjoyment of it was not very high. I was really excited for a beautiful sapphic relationship, some romance, and I don't feel like I really got that from this book. I don't think I'm really into slow burns. Not much happened until the latter half of the book, and before you knew it, the story was over. Only a few scenes actually felt romantic, but I am really excited to watch the movie. I think I will connect with it better, and it looks really well shot and really well done, so I'm excited to check it out. The book was just not really for me. So my month kind of had a rough start, but things definitely got better from there. When you read 15 books in a month, not all of them are going to be great. Next, I read Paul Tremblay's A Head Full of Ghosts. 5 stars. I read this last year, and I gave it 4 stars, and then I read it for a class this semester, and I loved it. We also interviewed Paul Tremblay, we had a discussion with Paul Tremblay in my horror class that I'm reading this for, and holy shit, it was so awesome. He was so kind, and it was great. So that kind of helped me understand the book a little more. It added a little more depth to it. And when I'm reading something academically, obviously I'm gonna look harder for the layers. The first time I read this, I kind of took the story at face value. It is about a young girl named Marjorie. She's 14 years old, and her parents believe that she's possessed. Instead of getting her real help, they decide to agree for a television crew to come into their house and film the experience during her possession, which obviously leads to a huge decline in her mental health. She's not getting the help that she needs. And kind of the question that goes throughout the story is she really possessed? Is she mentally ill? Is something else going on? And I loved the ambiguity of this book because I definitely have my own theories about what was happening. I personally believe that Marjorie and her younger sister Mary, who the story is told through, were victims of emotional abuse and neglect from their parents, and that led to a manifestation of trauma in Marjorie, and her mental illness that later came out exaggerated that and led to her acting out and led to her having a really bad time and hiring the television crew and taping this whole thing only led to a decline. But if you read this book and if you liked it, I would love to hear what your theory on it was. It was just so much better the second time around, and I cannot fucking believe I got to talk to Paul Tremblay. I can't believe it. I haven't loved all of Paul Tremblay's books. I actually have kind of accidentally read most of his books. I've read 5, and A Head Full of Ghosts, and a later book that I will be talking about in this wrap-up I really enjoyed. I also really loved The Cabinet at the End of the World, but Disappearance at Devil's Rock and Survivor Song were not really for me as much, but I really like his work, and I'm really excited to check out whatever he has next. He gave my class a little peek into what he was working on next, and I'm really excited to check it out. Next, I read How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. I gave this 2.5 stars. Unfortunately, I was not as into it as I wanted to be. I'd been anticipating this book for quite a long time, and it just didn't really stick with me, unfortunately. I really liked the concept on how to kind of back off from our phones, back off from social media, and live in the present and kind of enjoy living without worrying about other people and worrying about what other people are doing and just doing what you want to do and living your own life. I was so there for that. But this book just didn't really keep me super engaged. When I was listening to it, I felt pretty like I was passively enjoying it. It wasn't bad, but it also was not very good for me. If you have any recommendations that were similar to this book's premise, I would love to check them out. And I definitely did apply certain things after reading it, but not much. So it just didn't stick with me, and I feel bad because so many people love this book, but that's just my opinion. Next, I read Girl A by Abigail Dean. I also rated this 2.5 stars. I was really interested in the premise. It is about a girl that escaped her abusive family situation, and I think it is definitely based off some real events. Her parents kept her and her like 6 siblings, maybe more, maybe less, in the house, kept them locked up. It's a really awful, like, true crime inspired situation, but oh my god, I can barely tell you what happened in this book. There were a lot of different perspectives from the different children once they had grown up. I think it was like 15 years after, and I just don't really remember any of them. Can't tell you a single name in this book. It just didn't stick with me, and that's kind of all I have to say. I enjoyed it while I was reading it, and I listened to it pretty quickly, but once again, I don't remember anything about this book. So yeah. After that, I read Anne Rule's The Stranger Beside Me for my true crime class that I am taking. I first read this book when I was 13. It was my first true crime book that I had ever checked out, and I really loved it the first time I read it. The second time around, I rated it 3 stars, which isn't bad. I did enjoy reading it, and in my class we kind of critiqued the way that Anne Rule presents Ted Bundy, how she presents him as like a charming, attractive, all-American guy, and how that is harmful to the public perception of him that she helped build. This is one of the biggest true crime novels of all time, and it definitely contributed to the public image of Ted Bundy. Anne Rule was actually friends and colleagues with Ted Bundy. They worked at a suicide hotline together. Anne Rule was also a true crime writer, and when missing women started popping up around the area, she actually wrote about them. And eventually, a couple years later, when Ted Bundy was suspected and later arrested for the murders, she didn't believe that her friend could have done that, but the story follows her as she realizes that she never really knew who he was. And this is a giant fucking book. It is, without the like afterword and stuff, it's 500 pages. It's huge. So, I enjoyed the beginning. It introduced all of our characters. It built some tension. The middle was a lot of legal stuff and trial, which kind of lost me a bit. I've read trial content that I enjoyed, like Miracle Creek, but I think it's more of a fictional thing for me when I'm really into the characters and I care about the outcome. I don't fucking care about Ted Bundy. I already knew what happened, I did forget most of this from when I first read it because I was 13 years old, but it felt really boring in the middle. The end definitely picked up a little. It was more interesting, and kind of getting Anne Rule's meditation on the whole experience and the trauma that comes with learning that someone you know and care about is a fucking serial killer and murdered 30 women is insane. It doesn't seem like a real story, but it is. If you're interested in this book, I would recommend checking it out, maybe as an audiobook, kind of to get you through those points that it slows down a little bit. I wish that I had this on audiobook, but I didn't. So I read the whole thing for a class. I also wrote a paper about it, and it was cool paper. So, when I read things academically, I definitely enjoy them a little more because I have to put that much thought into the content. So I'm glad I picked this up again, because also, since I liked it so much when I was younger, it did feel a little like weirdly nostalgic in a way. So it was fun to revisit it. Hi. I am editing this video right now, and I just realized that I didn't talk about Growing Things by Paul Tremblay at all. It was a 3-star read for me. I really liked some of the stories, and some of the other ones were more forgettable. I really enjoyed Growing Things and the 13th Temple as they expanded upon A Head Full of Ghosts a little more, which was really fun. I really like how referential Paul Tremblay's works are. I think it makes it fun. Since I've read a lot of his work, it's really fun to discover all the connections between them. I also really liked Notes from the Barn in the Wild. It kind of felt like Into the Wild, but with a scary, like, found footage-esque twist. I really enjoyed that story, and it definitely creeped me out a little bit. I also really liked the storytelling device of 19 Shots of Dennisport, which is told through 19 photographs, descriptions of 19 photos. I really liked this. If you are a fan of Paul Tremblay, if you enjoyed A Head Full of Ghosts, definitely check out the first and last stories in this collection. I don't really read that many short story collections, so I'm excited to kind of try out more, and I'm really glad that I checked this one out. Next, I read A House at the Bottom of a Lake by Josh Malerman, who wrote Bird Box as well, I think, which honestly I don't have that much interest in reading, but I'll probably get around to it one day. Also rated this 2.5 stars. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad. I feel like I've said this so many times. It was just fine. It's about 2 teenagers that go on a first date taking a boat out on a lake, and they go through this little tunnel and find this secret lake, and when they're going through it, they glance into the water and see that there's a house at the bottom of a lake. And they kind of become infatuated with it. It brings them together, and it definitely spurs their relationship on. And through it, we're kind of wondering, like, are they really in love, or are they kind of under the spell of this house? It becomes their meeting place. They dive underwater to explore it more. It does have an unsettling undertone to it, though. Weird things are happening in the house. Obviously, the existence of the house itself is unsettling. I do think this book was marketed wrong. It is marketed as horror when it definitely isn't. My definition of horror is super broad, and I think a lot of things fit under that umbrella. This did not, which is fine. I don't exclusively read horror, obviously, but it's what I expected going into it, so I expected it to get more intense. And it had a weird ending, which once again I'm not against, but I don't feel like I really understood it, which I'm also not against. But something about it just didn't gel with me. Next, I read White is for Witching. I also read this for my horror class. It's a neo-Gothic novel about a girl named Miranda. She lives in a small town in England. Her family owns a bed and breakfast, and her mom has recently died. So it's just her father, and her twin brother. And since the death of her mother, Miranda has started acting really strange, and as the story goes on, she's really not acting like herself. It was really cool. It was written beautifully. A lot of the time I felt like I didn't really know what was going on. When I first came away from this book, I didn't really know what to think. But after discussing it in class once again and getting more insight into what was going on, I rated this 4 stars. It was beautifully written. It was super compelling. It was very easy to read, even though it was kind of written in this prose, which intimidated me. I really enjoyed the Gothic aspects of this novel. You have a scary house. You have the past coming back to haunt you. You have the twins, which is the classic Gothic double. it was really interesting, and I'm really glad that I got around to it. Thank you, Jamie, for making me try new things and reading things that I normally wouldn't. I liked this one a lot. Next, I read Pizza Girl by Jean Kyung Fraser. I gave this 4 stars. This book was awesome. Thank you, Sunny, at A Sunny Book Nook, for recommending this to me in their female manipulator girl boss book recommendations video. Check that video out if you haven't. I'll put a little link in the description for it. I love Sunny. I'm like their #1 fan. Anyways, I really enjoyed it. Obviously, I gave it 4 stars. It is about a young woman that lives in California. She's 19 and she's pregnant. She does not fucking want to be pregnant. She feels super lost in her life. She lives with her mom and her boyfriend, who she doesn't really like that much. She's a pizza delivery girl. One day, a woman calls into her job and asks her to make a special order of pepperoni and pickles pizza and deliver it to her home for her son. She gets there and just immediately like falls in love with this woman. She is in this weird, like, semi-homoerotic relationship with her that they form over the course of the novel. And obviously, like, mentally ill, female manipulator, main character, things just kind of fall apart from there. Would definitely recommend this book. I thought it was really fun. It also had some really touching and really sad moments, and I really felt for the main character, and I really related to her in some aspects as well. I think this is definitely a book that you will be able to find yourself a little in and then feel bad about that, which I think is really fun, and especially as someone who reads a lot of horror and a lot of bad, unreliable narrators, I love that shit. It was really good. Would recommend. It also has one of the best covers that I've seen all year. I would love to get a copy of this in person. Next, I read Jane a Murder by Maggie Nelson. Once again, for my true crime class, I rated this book 5 stars. It covers Maggie Nelson's relationship with her Aunt Jane. She was murdered before Nelson was born, but she still feels this pull to write about her and to discover who she was. And it's a multimedia book, so it is told in prose, in poetry, and in journal entries from Jane, kind of letting her speak for herself and getting to know who she was. It's also a commentary on true crime media and how it harms the people that are actually victims of these crimes. Maggie Nelson also wrote kind of a sequel to this novel, The Red Parts, that I finished today and I won't talk about because I didn't read it in September, but it was awesome. So I'm really loving Maggie Nelson's book. I'm excited to read more from her. It was a beautiful book. It made me cry. It's also a very quick read because most of it is short poetry and diary entries. I read this at work in like 2 hours. It was an amazing read, and I'm definitely getting more into poetry, which I'm very happy about. I've wanted to like poetry for so long, but I feel like I had never found something that I connected with. And this book was amazing. I would definitely recommend it if you're interested in true crime. It kind of humanized the victim in a way that I've never seen before, and I think that's something really important that we need to carry into our consumption of true crime. If you enjoy true crime, it can be really easy to become desensitized to it and to not even think twice about the victim, which is definitely an issue with The Stranger Beside Me. A lot of Ted Bundy's victims get kind of pulled together and almost blamed a little for their murders, which we also spoke about in class and all the issues with that. And we definitely spoke about these books in relationship to each other a lot because they're both deeply personal books. This book was amazing. I would definitely recommend it. It was beautiful. It was heartbreaking. It is brutal, though, so definitely look up some trigger warnings for this one. And, you know, this is a horror wrap-up. Look up trigger warnings for everything, please. Next, I read The Lost Village by Camilla Sten. I rated this 2 stars. It was marketed as Blair Witch Project meets Midsummer. It was kind of like that. It's about a Swedish village that everybody disappeared from in like sometime in the 1900s. The only person that was left in the village was this little baby, and nobody knows what happened to her or who she grew up to be. And so our main character is creating this Blair Witch style documentary about the town and trying to figure out what happened. The premise was really interesting and I was really excited to check out this book, but it was just not it. The way that it portrayed mentally ill and like mentally disabled people was fucked up. I did not like it. The ending was weird and boring and very abrupt, and I just did not enjoy this book. So yeah, I also found myself like I didn't really care about any of the characters. I was super spaced out during like half of this audiobook. It was just not for me. Next, I read A Cosmology of Monsters by Sean Hamill. I actually listened to the audiobook of this, but I do have the physical copy. I will probably be rereading this sometime because I did give it 3.5 stars. It wasn't a perfect book, but I did really enjoy it. It is about a family that schizophrenia runs in the family, but really, they are seeing real monsters. And it's really interesting premise. It also has to do with like this family creating a haunted house. So there's a lot of fun stuff in here. It's like a family drama almost, mixed with them running a haunted house and the fun stuff from that, mixed with monsters and like monsters existing in real life, which I love. It follows Noah, who is a teenage boy. He's scared of becoming his father, who died and no one in the family really talks about. He is worried about getting the schizophrenia in the family passed down to him, and then one day he starts seeing monsters. It definitely got weird. I will warn you, there's monster fucking, which was weird, and I don't know if I was here for that. But everything else about this book I liked. There's also a sapphic relationship represented in here, which I really enjoyed, of course. And yeah, I liked this book a lot. I'm excited to reread it with my physical copy, because isn't like this one of the coolest copies that you've seen? Like, come on, it's beautiful. Yeah, really liked this book. The second to last book that I read was The Harpy by Megan Hunter. 2 stars on this one. It almost reminded me of Night Bitch, which I read last month and gave 4 stars and really enjoyed. This was like Night Bitch but boring. It's a novella about a woman that finds out her husband is cheating on her and kind of just slowly loses her shit throughout the story, which I love. I love women slowly losing their shit in horror. It's like a staple of the genre. But this just did not vibe with me. And, you know, she's slowly, metaphorically, maybe turning into a harpy, which I love harpies, and I really thought this would focus on that more and focus on the folklore. And it didn't. So it was just kind of a bummer. It wasn't like a waste of my time or anything though. I think it's like a 4-hour long audiobook, so definitely would not recommend. It was just boring. Okay, last, I left the month on a really, really good note. I read Coyote Songs by Gabino Iglesias. 5 fucking stars. This is one of my favorite books I've read all year. I haven't really felt this way about a book since I read True Crime by Samantha Kolsniak. So fucking good. I guess I just really like super graphic, brutal horror. He combines the horror of kind of everyday life of people trying to cross the border with supernatural elements, and this story was amazing. It had 5 different perspectives. I was equally as interested in all of them. The violence in this book is so well written and so warranted. It's basically a big revenge novel, which was so fucking awesome to see these marginalized people just stand up against all the bullshit that they've had to deal with for their entire lives. And it was super violent, it was super bloody. The way he writes characters is so compelling. Like I said, I was so invested in all of the points. It was a really hard novel to read sometimes because you know this shit is actually happening in real life somewhere. And that was really hard to kind of grapple with. It is also written in mostly English, but there is a lot of instances of characters speaking in Spanish and Spanglish, which I really liked that addition to the novel. Obviously, it was more real, and that's how fucking people talk, and the way that Iglesias writes dialogue was amazing. I actually also got to talk to him for my horror class, which was such a treat. He is amazing. He's so great to talk to. He has so much good stuff to say about writing and about how he made this book and what inspired him, and it was really cool to talk to the person behind all of that. If you don't follow him, check this fucking book out. It only has like 900 ratings on Goodreads. I think so many people need to read this book. If you like Stephen Graham Jones, I think there's definitely some comparisons to be drawn there. If you like brutal, violent horror, check this shit out. You're gonna be rooting for the main characters the whole time, even if they aren't super morally awesome. You're gonna love them. I can't recommend this book enough. It was such a good way to end off my month. 5 out of 5 stars. Please, please, please check this out. I cannot wait to read more of this author's work. So yeah, that is everything that I read this month. This is one of my biggest reading months in a long time. I had such a great time. It definitely had its ups and downs, but every month does. I hope you enjoyed this video. I have some fun video ideas coming up soon. I really want to make a fall recommendations video. So if you're looking for any specific horror or just fall book recommendations, comment below what kind of stuff you're looking for and I'll definitely answer it in that video. If you read any of these books, comment down below. I would love to know what you thought about them. Like and subscribe if you want to. I will also be putting my social media, my Goodreads, and my reading Instagram in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.